Have you ever experienced one of those difficult and awkward conversations where your parents say to you, come here, sit down, we've got to have a serious talk? You ever experienced that? This is a yes, this is a no. Yes, we've all experienced it. Well, guess what? It's a good thing you're sitting down. You call me Father, and rightfully so, because I am a spiritual father to you. And so what I want to offer to you today is very different than what I normally do by way of the messages I offer in my homilies. I have spent all week very deliberately praying about what we heard in these readings, and I think it's time we have a chat. You see, we have a sin problem. It's one of the most difficult topics to talk about. It's certainly a difficult topic to preach about, and I'm certain it's a difficult topic to hear. And the problem is, so often when we hear preachers preaching about sin, it's simply to lay upon you all the more shame to get you to try to think that you're dirty or nasty or filthy or evil or bad. That's not my point here. This is not about heaping upon you all that much more Catholic guilt or shame. That's not the goal here. But if we want to take the gospel of Jesus seriously, the message we heard in the readings, what we have to come to understand is for Jesus, the problem, with a capital T, is sin. The beginning of all of the problems in our world and the continuation of all of the problems in our world is sin. And so today we heard from the gospel passage that's smack dab in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. This great sermon that Jesus preached that we remember with great affection. And the difficult thing is Jesus, while not addressing the entire list of sins, does in fact address three areas of sin that I want to propose to you we need to listen to with open hearts and with humble minds. Because we, and I say we because I'm right there with you, we do have a sin problem. First, Jesus says, you have heard that it is said, thou shalt not kill. Okay, that's kind of easy, right? Don't kill anyone. I think for the most part, we have managed that. But Jesus then takes it a whole lot farther. He raises the bar of morality and he says, but I say to you, don't even be angry with a brother or sister. And this is where I think we have a serious sin problem in our world today. Because the only way, it seems, that we know how, and I say we as in the sense of our larger culture, the only way that it seems we know how to talk about issues, talk about politics or society or our culture, we today have this culture of contempt. Everyone from our highest political leaders on down, the only way that they know how to talk about division or disagreement is through the lens of contempt for the other. And my concern is that's trickling down. That we're learning based on their bad example that this is the only way to talk about these things. And so we have to allow ourselves to be challenged and realize that what Jesus is calling us to is a different way of engaging. That the moment we say raka, which translates idiot or empty-headed, literally. The moment we approach our adversaries that way or call them fools is the moment that we're violating this commandment, because while we may not be killing their bodies, we are killing their humanity. We're stripping them of their human dignity, and we're approaching these issues wrong. Jesus said to us, you have heard it said, do not commit adultery. But I say to you, the moment you commit lust, you have sinned against this commandment. Now, I know this is probably hard to hear. Believe me, it's hard to say, and it's something I've prayed about all week. But I think we in our culture need to have a moment of honesty. Because on this issue, we certainly have a sin problem. Think about all of the messages that you hear. Think about all of the temptations of which you are confronted. How our culture says to you that the way in which you need to fully be human and discover who you are is to engage in everything from fornication to pornography to lust of every variety. And in so doing, that's how you discover who you authentically are. Think about the parties and the late nights and the celebrations and all the things that are going on. Consider how it is that our hookup culture has normalized lust. This is a sin problem. This is not the way that things should be. Jesus was so bold that he said, if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out. If your hand causes you to sin, get rid of it. He takes it to the extreme of challenging us to realize that the most drastic measures are good and necessary because this is a problem when it comes to sin. Jesus then says to us, let your yes mean yes and your no mean no. He says, do not swear by heaven or earth, the temple or Jerusalem. How often, when it comes to the way in which we are living in our world, how often do we struggle with the words we say? Maybe it's not false oaths, but maybe it is. What about swearing in the sense of foul language? I think we have a bit of a sin problem. I think when it comes to letting our yes mean yes and our no mean no, how often are we confronted by the temptation to maybe give in to academic dishonesty? Maybe not dishonesty in a face-to-face conversation or in some other form like that, but how constant is that temptation to cut corners and to find the easy way through and to give up our integrity when it comes to our studies and the honesty of our academic commitments? How often do we struggle with these sins? Now, I'll be honest with you. This is a rarity for me to be this blunt and this straightforward and this brutally candid. But I think the readings challenge us to have this moment of honesty. Every now and again, we just need to have a little bit of a reckoning and to be honest with ourselves and let Jesus challenge us. And this is one of the things that bothers me. So frequently, I hear people say to me, Father, I used to be Catholic, but I left because of all the rules. I left the Catholic Church because it seemed like there was this nonstop list of rules on do this, don't do that, and it just seemed like a bunch of grumpy old white men who were trying to control my life and tell me not to have fun. Think about it this way. Have you ever heard someone who used to be a football fan say that they gave up their passion for the game of football because the referees were throwing the little yellow flags too often? Football certainly has a lot of rules, but I've never heard anybody say, I give up my love of the game because of the umpires, the referees. Rather, we realize the more that you fall in love with the game, the rules help the game to really be successful. Everybody knows how to do it well and fairly. And then the beauty of athletic contest and achievement and all these other types of things are made better because of the rules, not in spite of the rules. The rules contribute to the pursuit of excellence in an athletic contest. And I can list off every single sport. I've never heard anybody say, I gave up my love of sports because, golly gee, there are just too many rules. And yet, how often do we give in to the temptation to pull away from our faith because at this moment in our life, it seems like I don't like those rules, and that's okay. Nobody does. I don't like those rules, so I'm going to give it up. There's something greater and more beautiful here in our faith than just the rules. And here's the point. Here's why we have them. Let me explain it to you. Because from Genesis chapter 1 all the way through Revelation chapter 22, the entirety of our faith, the entirety of Scripture is begging us to love God. And so often we get this idea wrong. We allow the love of God to be a sentimental feeling and to be a 1-hour activity on Sunday. But that's not what God is asking of us. The love of God is a lot bigger than that. Think about what in your life takes up most of your emotional energy, your creativity, your passion, your talent, your ability, your time, your dedication. What is that aspect of your life that most of your life is dedicated to? Whatever that is what you love the most. That's what Scripture challenges us to consider. That which takes up most of yourself is what you love. And that love is called worship. That which we love as our highest priority in our life is what we worship. And God asks of us, Jesus is begging us, worship the Lord your God above all other things. Because you cannot worship two masters. You can only love one. And here's the problem with sin. Particularly the sins that we heard about in the gospel today. These are the most seductive sins that get in the way of our loving God. It's not about passing rules to make your life more miserable or to somehow get in the way of your social life or get in the way of having fun. It's about getting rid of those barricades to loving God, getting rid of those things that would draw us away from God. Please don't believe the lies of the people in our world who tell you your time in college is your time to have fun, to experiment, to experience all kinds of things, that it doesn't matter what you do in college because the time will come, then later you can be responsible, later you can be moral. Right now is the time to go crazy and do whatever. That's not true. Talk to anyone here who's older than I am, and they will tell you what you do in college becomes the foundation of who you become when you're old. The life that you want must begin now. Because if you live a certain way now, you cannot suddenly change and become something else. This moment in your life is highly formative. Who you are, what you do, who you worship, and what you love determines who you will be. That's why the very heart and soul and the greatest commandment of our faith is to love God. That's why Jesus is talking about very candidly and sometimes hard to hear, turn away from these sins because they are destructive to our relationship with God. He is always merciful. I promise you, if you struggle with this, there is mercy. I promise you. I'm begging you to believe that. But the heart and soul of our faith is to live in such a way as to rid our lives of those sins that are destructive and seductive temptations that pull us away. Because the most important thing is to love God above everything else. That is our faith. That is Jesus' challenge.